Hello and welcome to IBTimes TV. I'm Leanna Brinder, Deputy Business Editor for the International Business Times. Joining me now is Sarah Churchman. She's the Head of Diversity at PwC. So hi Sarah.
Hi.
Hi. Well, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
We want to talk about the very obviously popular topic about women breaking that glass ceiling. So over the last maybe few years, how has women in the boardroom changed?
Well, I think for a start, it's much publicised. There's so much talk about women in the boardroom or lack of women in the boardroom, whether it's on the TV, on the radio, in the press. It's so well researched and it's so well discussed, which I think actually helps because there's a lot of pressure, I think, on business leaders to look at their boardroom and really begin to think about the diversity therein. Are they bringing people with different skill sets, with different thinking styles, with different backgrounds? And within that context, they start to put the spotlight on gender diversity.
Sure, and has there been any interesting developments in terms of trends that have evolved from that research and maybe people implementing their own programs?
I think so. I mean, I think a few years ago there was an aim to get one woman into the boardroom, but there's been various bits of research by London Business School, for example, that show that really for a minority group to have a voice and to have any kind of influence, you need more than one. You need, two or three. So I think what we're seeing now are boardrooms with multiple numbers of women, which I think is a great thing because she's not the lone voice anymore or the token appointment.
Sure, and I mean, when it comes to having more women in the boardroom, one of the, I suppose, fears that or concerns people have said is about box ticking and quotas. So what can companies do in order to implement certain programs or strategies that still promote equality but without doing a box ticking exercise?
Well, I think there's always going to be those who see this as tokenism, as you say, or ticking a box, I've got one, so the job is done. But I think there is pressure now on chief executives, chairmen, to actually have more than one. So, as I say, it's not just one's there, so tick the box. I think it's about looking at the varied skills that you need within the boardroom and the different perspectives. So I think, at the moment we're looking at gender, but I think we need other people in that boardroom as well, people who represent different cultural backgrounds and other kinds of minority groups. So I think we're on a journey. There's definitely a trend here, but I think to just take the view that it will evolve and happen over time, I think is now much discredited. I think what most people realise is that to diversify that boardroom, you need to actually go out and look for different people and bring them in. And within your own organisation, in terms of building that pipeline, recognise that, different kinds of people need different kinds of support to bring them through. So equality isn't about treating everybody fairly and expecting, everyone to come through there being a level playing field. To actually create a level playing field, you've got to treat different people differently to give them a fair chance of coming through to senior roles.
Sure. I mean, there are some companies or sectors that may be, I suppose, flying the flag a bit more. But there are certain sectors, especially in tech, for instance, or in finance, where there still seems to be a lot of concern that there aren't that many in the boardroom still, or as leaders, like CEOs. Yeah. Why is that?
Well, I think it's all about being attractive to women in the first place. I think there is a concern that not enough women go into the technology sector or the science and the engineering sector. Same within financial services. They struggle to attract women in, both at sort of graduate level, but also in the more senior ranks too. So I think getting women into the boardroom is about having a strategy right from attraction in the early days, attracting people early on in their career, and then, of course, creating an environment in which they're likely to stay, because there's no point attracting people if you can't retain them. And as I say, develop them in the way they need to be developed, treat them as an individual, ensure they're getting the right support to sort of nurture them and bring them through to more senior roles.
Yeah, especially on the graduate level, that's quite interesting that now companies seem to be going back to near the beginning to nurture people to come into the sector. Do you see maybe more development or private company involvement in maybe middle school education, A-levels as well, in order to promote the science, tech, finance areas?
Absolutely. Well, in my own organisation, PwC, we go into schools. I think, myths about what jobs girls and boys do start at quite an early age, and I think there are certain people of certain backgrounds that kind of rule out certain professions and certain jobs. So I think PwC, my own organisation, and I know others, go into schools quite early to try and demystify the profession, but also blow those myths that it's a boy's job, or it's you've got to be white to do it. It's about making sure that people are considering all the options available to them, and and ensuring that we're seen as an attractive profession for them to enter.
Sure, and I mean there's a lot of progression that seems to be being made. So what would you say are the major milestones that you're hoping to see over the short term and medium term, let's say?
Well, I think in the boardroom, it's kind of, you know, we've had our sights fairly set now by Lord Davies on his target of 25% of FTSE 100 boardrooms to be female. So I think the goal is to actually deliver on that. But I think, you know, it wasn't long after Lord Davies published his report in 2011 that people started to criticise that it was, you know, an over-focus on the boardroom and not enough focus on the pipeline. So I think organisations like mine and others are looking to see what can we do internally to ensure we bring more women and more minorities through to the executive committee level. And I think, as I said earlier, that's about maybe ensuring that the playing field is level. I think often the concern is that, you know, senior people like to believe that organisations are already very much merit-based, and any kind of tinkering with that is positive discrimination, whereas I think what many of us see is that maybe organisations aren't as meritocratic as they like to think they are. They're very cosy, they favour a certain kind of person who maybe works in a certain way, and actually we've got to unpick some of that and maybe offer different working arrangements, different means of support to individuals to ensure the playing field is level and therefore they've got equal chance of getting on. So a really good example of that seems to be quite popular at the moment is this whole idea of sponsorship as opposed to mentoring. And in my own organisation we've just rolled out a very successful sort of female partner sponsorship programme, now down to females and ethnic minorities in our sort of next level down at director level and senior manager level. And all this is saying is that, you know, the support that certain kinds of people have historically had, i.e. they've had some kind of senior level supporter who's looked out for them, has made sure they've got the right experience, getting onto the right jobs, etc. And they're, you know, they're an advocate for them. That role is actually of benefit to a wider group of people. So sponsorship is I think one of the key things that any organisation of any size can consider looking at and implementing.
Great. Well, that all sounds great, and hopefully, you know, there'll be more progress in the near term and the long term.
We hope so.
Well, thank you very much for your time. That was Sarah Churchman, Head of Diversity at PwC.